Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about the relationship between fractions and decimals. This is going to be a really short one because you're going to see a lot in the lesson today, but I do want to give you a little bit of an introduction on the relationship between fractions and decimals. So when we've been looking at fractions, say for example, the fraction 1/8, 1 over 8, we read it as 1/8, 2 over 10 we would read as 2/10, and if we had something like 1 and 1/2, we would obviously read it as 1 and 1/2. So over here on the left again, this would be 1/8, in the middle would be 2/10, and on the right would be 1 and 1/2. Well, today what we're going to start to look at is, we're going to start to look at the relationship between fractions and decimals, and how you would read a decimal and how you would read a fraction. Now, since we already know how to read the fractions, I'm not going to cover that so much. It's more of the decimal. So in decimals, you have to think of, in a number like 356, each of these digits is in a place. And we learned that earlier this year. So the 6 would be in the ones place. We know that. The 5 would be in the tens, T-E-N-S place. And the 3 would be in the hundreds place. Okay, hundreds. That's important because after the ones place, this is where the decimal point is going to fall, and there are places on this side as well. Right? And today, really all we're going to focus on are the first two places. So the first one after, to the right of the decimal point, is called the tenths place. T-E-N-T-H-S. Now, don't get that confused with the tens place because it is completely different. So we have the tenths place, and that means that the value of whatever this digit is going to be 10 times less than the value of the ones place. We talked about that, in the base 10 system before. The second one to the right is called the hundredths place. I'll squeeze it in down here. Hundredths. So you'll notice the THS on tenths and the THS on hundredths. Don't get those confused with the tens place and the hundreds place. And again, the same thing would hold true. And if we fill in some digits here, let's go with 27. So the 7 is in the hundredths place, and the value of that would be 10 times less than, say, a 7 if it was in the tenths place. And that would be 10 times less than a 7 if it was in the ones place. And then we also, same thing holds true that if there's a 7 in the ones place and a 7 in the tens place, the tens place would be 10 times more valuable, and so on. So looking at this number, 356.27, you would read this as 356. We know that part. The decimal point over here, we read as and, 356 and 27, and then you say the final place, which would be hundredths. 356 and 27 hundredths. Let's look at another one that has just decimals and not numbers in front of the decimal point. So in this case, we'll look at a number that has a 0 in the ones place, a decimal point, and a 2. Right, this one would be read as 0. Obviously, there's a 0 in the ones place. You start on the left. 0 and 2, and then this would be in the tenths place. So this number would be read as 0 and 2/10. Now, you might be thinking, wait a second. That sounds familiar because I know we had fractions like this, 2/10, and we can say 0 and 2/10 the decimal is equal to 2/10 the fraction. They're the same thing, just it's written in a different expression. So 0 and 2/10 as a decimal over here would be the same as 2/10 the fraction on the right side. Look at one more. This time we'll go with, again, we'll keep it as a 0, so 0 and 0.6. Right? This time we would read this as 0. Decimal point is always and, 0 and 6, and again that's in the tenths place, T-E-N-T-H-S, 0 and 6/10, and that would of course be the same as the fraction 6/10. Right? 0 and 6/10 the decimal equals 6/10 the fraction. I'm going to give you a couple here and see if you could read them. So we'll go with 0.4, 0.6. And here's a tricky one. Let's go with 2.3. Give you a few seconds here. I'm going to stop talking. You can pause the video. Think about how you would write these as a fraction or how you would read them. And then I'll put the answers up here so that you can see them. All right, you had a few seconds. The first one up here I would read as 0 and 4/10. There's a 4 in the tens place. And as a fraction, that would be 4/10. 0 and 4/10. The second one would be 0 and 6 in the tens place. So that would be 0 and 6/10, or as a fraction, 6/10. And the last one over here, this one's a bit tricky, but not too hard. Maybe you picked up on the pattern. This one would be 2 and 3/10. Now, how would you write that one as a fraction? Well, we have a whole 2, and then we have 3/10 as a fraction. 2 and 3/10. These would all be equal or equivalent. We're going to look at the relationship today between decimals and fractions. So now you guys have a jump start on it. See you in a bit.